everybody. David McCoy, Ochimo Properties, Real Estate Matters. Today I thought we would talk a little bit about real estate contracts. In most places, I think, where there is a real estate association, which is in most places, the real estate association probably has a contract which pretty much everybody uses. In fact, I think many times, I don't know that they can require it, but they strongly suggest that people all use the same contract. And there's a lot of benefits to that. It does speed up the contract considerably, and the members all tend to become very familiar with it. And so they kind of know what things are, which makes it easier to explain and also makes it easier to know where to look for things. And of course, as real estate brokers, we are people who help with real estate transactions. We give advice and market and do all of those kinds of things that a real estate broker or agent might do. We are not supposed to be trying to practice law unless we have a law degree, which some people do, but most people don't. And we're not supposed to be accountants. We're not supposed to give financial advice, unless if we're not an accountant or a financial advisor. We are not supposed to do that either. We're not supposed to give advice for which we are not qualified. That doesn't mean that we don't learn a lot about these things, but it is true that it would be inappropriate for us to give advice for things for which we were not qualified. So we are told. I mean, that's part of our real estate law. It's also part of the code of ethics. Is you're not supposed to do that. And so residential contracts largely are like that. Then I mean, most real estate associations have sort of their standard form contract, which pretty much all the members use, and it has ways that you can make adjustments if needed, but that's what most people do. Well, commercial real estate contracts are a little bit different from that. Commercial real estate is not as, I'm going to say, homogeneous or as residential real estate is. Now, I know that a lot of my residential real estate friends are probably jumping up and down now, and they're unhappy, and they're like, these are not, all the same. It's not homogeneous, and that's true, but you have basically the same things for most residential contracts. And I mean, you generally have a house. I guess a residential contract could be land, and that would be different, and that might take a different contract actually. But it's much more similar in terms of what you're covering than it might be with a commercial contract. Because a commercial contract for, say, land is entirely different. It's a completely different thing than a commercial contract for, say, an industrial building, or for a retail building, or an office building. Now there's a lot of similarities there, but it's a little more difficult to come up with just a standard contract that can be used for pretty much any commercial situation. And there's a lot of issues that come up in commercial transactions that don't often come up in residential transactions. And I've talked about some of these things before. I believe there was a video I did with talking about what your realtor does for you, and so we discussed some of these things. But there are different tax situations. There could be economic incentive situations. There could be zoning changes. There could be things that you have to check, and if you have, particularly if you have land, You have to make sure that you can build what you want to on that land and that the land is suitable for building. And there's just a number of things you have to do. And whereas this is sort of a rule of thumb. It changes, of course, depending upon the market, but it's very common for a residential sales transaction to happen in a couple of months. I think 60 days is very common. You put it under contract, you do a home inspection, you get everything funded, and then you can close usually within 60 days. So it can be less, it can be more, but most residential transactions happen quite quickly. Commercial contracts, it depends. I mean, it depends upon what you're buying. It depends upon what all is going to go on there. I've had contracts that took more than 4 years before they were finally done. And so the commercial contract is a very different thing than the residential contract. It's generally not just a stock contract that you can fill in, and there's a lot of things that you kind of need to go over with your broker to do it correctly. And if you don't do it correctly, and this isn't to try to needlessly scare people, but it can cost your client a lot of money if it's done incorrectly. I mean, it can get them where they have a situation where maybe they bought something, and once they buy it, they find out that there's a restriction that keeps them from being able to do it, and that's money that they may not be able to get back. So commercial contracts are quite different from residential contracts, and I think the main thing we want to do here is just kind of scratch that surface and let you know that. And so there are a number, and this is I guess some advice is that if you're doing a commercial transaction, it's good to have someone who is experienced in commercial transactions, and meaning to cast no shade on people, but that commercial experience, the commercial transaction, it can be a very different animal than a residential transaction. There are a number of people that specialize only in commercial. There are some people who do residential and commercial, and again, not knocking any of them. Some of them have done a lot, and they do very well. There are sometimes residential people who are doing transactions, and again, not knocking anybody who wants to learn and maybe pick that up and either switch into commercial or become competent and do that on their own. But they should, if they do not have experience and do not know, they should have some assistance to make sure that everything is being addressed correctly. And that might be their broker. Their broker might have plenty of experience, or maybe a co-worker who does a lot of things, or some sort of a mentor. And again, I'm not knocking anybody because different people are different, but I have seen a number of transactions where residential agents want to become commercial agents and they have no commercial experience, and they're representing their client in a transaction, and it's actually a little bit of a funny situation, because you're in this situation and this person is not doing a good job of representing their client because they don't understand it. And it's not because they don't want to, I don't think. It's not because they're not trying, but they don't understand it and they don't know. And here you are, you're in the transaction, but you are perhaps representing the other side, and which is what you're supposed to do. And so sometimes it's a funny situation because you're trying to be honest and forthright, and but you also have to represent your client, and you can see that the other client is not being represented well. unfortunately, sometimes that's just the way it goes. I mean, sometimes you just have to let that go. But sometimes you're in a situation and you wonder ethically, it's like, I need to make sure that I have everything taken care of. And honestly, those are a little bit precarious or dangerous for commercial agents anyway, because you're kind of wondering, if once this transaction is done, if this person gets burned because their agent didn't know what they were doing, will they try to implicate me? It's you hate to think of that, but so I mean, I do try to always make sure that I'm dotting my I's, crossing my T's, checking all the boxes, and that I'm representing my client, but at the same time being honest and fair, and trying to make sure that all questions and everything are answered honestly to the other side. But just a little bit of a warning there. If you have an agent and they say, "Hey, I'm new at this," but they're trying hard and doing that, I'm not knocking that. I mean, that's fine, but they should be upfront with you about it, and they should get advice on it too, to make sure that they're doing everything right. But you can't blame people for wanting to expand their set of skills. But I will say, as a caveat, make sure that you're being well represented, because it is very different, and there are a lot of things to consider, and it can be a heavy price if it's done incorrectly. So that's probably enough on that topic. Again, I know we just sort of scratched the surface, but wanted to just kind of get that out there. If you have questions about that, let me know. I'd be glad to go more in depth with you if you would like. You can send me a note or through YouTube, or leave a comment, and I'll try to respond. So we'll call it an evening. I hope that you like this. If you did, I hope you will click like. If you know someone who might benefit from this, I hope you will share it with them. And if you would like to see more of these in the future, please click subscribe. And that's it for this evening. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great evening. Take care. Bye.